The deafening silence of the Montana wilderness was broken by a single gunshot that echoed across the valley, sending a flock of startled birds into the azure sky of 1878. Eliza Peterson stood frozen on the porch of her father's modest homestead, her honey-colored hair whipping around her face in the autumn breeze, knowing that sound marked the arrival of Herbert Dawson, the man who had come to collect on her father's debt. "Papa, please," Eliza whispered, her voice trembling as she followed her father back into their small cabin. "There must be another way." George Peterson, once a proud man with dreams as vast as the western frontier, now hunched over with the weight of his failures, couldn't meet his daughter's pleading gaze. "I'm sorry, Eliza, I gave my word. The debt must be paid. But marriage, to a man 30 years my senior." Tears welled in her eyes. At 22, Eliza had nursed dreams of love and adventure, not becoming the wife of a man known throughout the territory for his cruelty and greed. The sound of approaching horses grew louder. Through the window, Eliza could see Dawson riding toward their homestead, flanked by two of his men. Their expressions were hard, unyielding, like the land they had conquered. "He's forgiven $15,000 of debt for your hand," her father said weakly. "We would lose everything otherwise. So instead you're losing me." The words fell between them like stones. A heavy knock rattled the door. Her father moved to answer it, but Eliza placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Give me 3 days," she whispered desperately. "Just 3 days to find another solution." Her father's weathered face crumpled. "There is no other solution, child." The door swung open without their permission. Herbert Dawson filled the frame, his substantial girth barely contained by an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the rugged Montana territory. His beard was neatly trimmed, his eyes cold and calculating as they swept over Eliza. "My beautiful bride," he said, the words slithering from his mouth. "I've come to finalize our arrangement." "Mr. Dawson," George began, straightening his shoulders in a last attempt at dignity. "Perhaps we could discuss terms once more." Dawson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The terms were agreed upon 6 months ago, Peterson. $15,000 forgiven for your daughter's hand. The papers are already drawn up." He snapped his fingers, and one of his men produced a document. Eliza felt the walls closing in. This couldn't be happening, not to her, not like this. "I need more time," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. Dawson regarded her with amusement. "Time for what, my dear? To run away? I think not. The wedding will take place in 1 week. My home is prepared for your arrival." He turned to her father. "Unless, of course, you have my money ready." George Peterson's silence was answer enough. "As I thought." Dawson stepped closer to Eliza, his breath hot on her face. 1 week, Miss Peterson, then you become Mrs. Dawson." After they departed, Eliza collapsed into a chair, her mind racing. She had 1 week to escape this fate, 1 week to save herself. "I'll find work in town," she said desperately. "I can be a seamstress or work at the general store, anything to help pay the debt." Her father shook his head sadly. "It would take years to pay what we owe. Dawson won't wait. He's a powerful man in these parts, Eliza. No one would dare help us against him." That night, Eliza lay awake, staring at the ceiling, refusing to accept that her life had been bartered away. There had to be a way out. There had to be. Miles away, in the small but growing town of Silverdale, Quentin Porter stepped off the stagecoach, his legs stiff from the long journey. At 30 years old, he'd spent the last decade building a life for himself, first as a cattle driver, then as a ranch hand, saving every penny along the way. His dream of owning land in Montana territory was finally within reach. Quentyn adjusted his hat against the setting sun and took in the town. Silverdale wasn't much a main street lined with the usual establishments: saloon, general store, blacksmith, small hotel. But it was the gateway to some of the richest grazing land in the territory, and that's what had drawn him here. "First time in Silverdale?" asked the stagecoach driver as he unloaded Quentyn's trunk. "Yes, sir," Quentyn replied, handing the man a coin. "Heard there's good land to be had around these parts." The driver nodded. "That there is, if you can afford it, or if Herbert Dawson doesn't want it first." Quentyn had heard the name before. "Big landowner, biggest, and not one to cross." The driver lowered his voice. Word is he's finally getting himself a wife, some poor girl whose father couldn't pay his debts. Something in Quentin's chest tightened. He'd seen such arrangements before, had even witnessed the aftermath, broken women tied to cruel men. When's this wedding supposed to happen? Week from now, I reckon. Town's already buzzing about it. Dawson's throwing quite the celebration, wants everyone to see his prize. Quentyn thanked the man for the information and headed toward the hotel. He needed rest before meeting with the land agent tomorrow. His life savings of $8,000 would secure him a modest spread, enough to start building the life he'd always wanted. But as he walked down the dusty main street, the driver's words echoed in his mind. Some poor girl whose father couldn't pay his debts. It wasn't his concern, he told himself. He had his own future to think about. Yet somehow, he couldn't shake the feeling that fate had brought him to Silverdale for more than just land. The next morning found Eliza at the small creek that ran behind their property, washing clothes with more force than necessary, as if she could scrub away her problems along with the dirt. Her younger sister, Lily, just 16, watched with concern. "You could run away," Lily suggested, voicing the thought that had kept Eliza awake all night. "And go where?" Eliza wrung out a shirt. "With what money, and what would happen to you and Papa?" Lily had no answer for that. They both knew that Dawson would take their land, maybe even pursue legal action against their father. The debt would still be there, and Eliza would be branded an oath-breaker, making survival even harder. "There's that new land agent in town," Lily said suddenly. "Maybe he could help somehow." Eliza paused. "What new land agent?" Mr. Williams mentioned him yesterday when he delivered our flour. Said he's set up office next to the bank, helping people buy and sell property. A fragile hope flickered in Eliza's heart. Perhaps there was a way to sell part of their land, enough to cover the debt without losing everything. It was a long shot, but it was something. "I'm going into town," she decided, standing up and drying her hands on her apron. "Can you finish these?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Be careful." Dawson has eyes everywhere. Eliza changed into her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days but was still presentable. She harnessed their old mare to the wagon and set off for Silverdale, her heart pounding with desperate hope. The land agent's office was small but neat, with maps covering the walls. A young man sat behind the desk, examining documents. He looked up when Eliza entered, and for a moment she was struck by his eyes, kind yet determined, the color of the sky just before dusk. "Good morning, madam," he said, standing up. "Quentin Porter, how can I help you today?" Eliza hesitated, suddenly aware of how foolish her plan might sound. My family owns a small homestead about 5 miles east of town. We're considering selling a portion of it to cover some expenses." Quentin gestured for her to take a seat. "May I ask your name, Miss Eliza Peterson?" Something flickered across his face recognition. "Peterson, your father is George Peterson," she nodded, wariness creeping in. "You know of him?" "Only by reputation," Quentin said carefully. "I understand your family has been in the area for some time. Since I was a child, the land is all we have." She took a deep breath. "Mr. Porter, I need to raise $15,000 in less than a week. Is there any way our land could fetch that price, even if we sold most of it?" Quentin's expression grew serious. "Miss Peterson, I won't lie to you. Land values in this area are good, but not that good. Your family's 100 acres might bring 5,000 at most." Eliza's hope crumbled. "I see. If you don't mind my asking," Quentin said gently, "what's the urgency?" She shouldn't tell him. This stranger had no reason to care about her predicament, yet something in his eyes made her trust him. "My father owes a debt to Herbert Dawson, $15,000, and Mr. Dawson has agreed to forgive it in exchange for my hand in marriage." Quentin's jaw tightened. "Against your will. Does it matter? The debt is real. The arrangement is legal." "It matters," he said firmly. "It matters a great deal." For a moment neither spoke. Then Quentin asked, "When is this wedding supposed to take place?" 6 days from now. "Unless the debt is paid in full before then." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling town. When he turned back, his expression was resolute. "Miss Peterson, I may be able to help you. I need time to arrange some matters, but if you could return tomorrow morning." Hope fluttered again, fragile as a butterfly's wing. "What kind of help?" I'm not certain yet, but I promise I'll try to find a solution. As Eliza drove the wagon home, her mind whirled with possibilities. Could this stranger really help her, and why would he? She'd seen the look in his eyes when she mentioned Dawson's name, not fear, like most people showed, but something harder, more determined. That evening, as twilight painted the mountains purple, Eliza sat on the porch steps, trying to find peace in the beauty of the land she'd always called home. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her stiffen, fear climbing up her throat like ivy, but it wasn't Dawson who appeared at the edge of their property. It was Quentin Porter, riding a sturdy chestnut gelding. He dismounted and approached, removing his hat respectfully. "Miss Peterson," he said, "forgive the intrusion. I hoped we might speak privately." Her father appeared in the doorway behind her. "Eliza, who's this?" "Papa, this is Mr. Porter, the new land agent in town." She turned to Quentyn. "This is my father, George Peterson." Quentyn extended his hand. "Sir, it's an honor. I've heard much about your craftsmanship. The furniture you built for the church is remarkable." George seemed taken aback by the compliment. "Thank you, young man. What brings you out our way?" "Business, sir. May I have a word with you both?" They sat around the small kitchen table, Lily bringing coffee before retreating to give them privacy. Quentyn didn't waste time. "Mr. Peterson, your daughter explained your situation with Herbert Dawson. I'd like to help." George's expression hardened. "We don't need charity." "It's not charity I'm offering, sir. It's a business proposition." Quentyn leaned forward. "I came to Montana to buy land and start a cattle operation. I have $8,000 saved for that purpose." Eliza's breath caught. That was a fortune to most people in these parts. "It's not enough to clear your debt," Quentyn continued, "but combined with what your land might fetch, it could come close. I'm willing to offer my savings to help pay off Dawson." George stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do such a thing? You don't even know us." Quentyn's gaze shifted to Eliza, then back to her father. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when good people are forced into bad situations. I can't stand by and watch it happen again." "And what would you want in return?" George asked suspiciously. "A partnership. I help clear your debt, and in exchange, we combine our resources, my cattle knowledge and remaining funds, your land and farming experience. We build something together." Eliza could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Mr. Porter, that's incredibly generous, but still not enough to pay Dawson." "I have a plan for the rest," Quentyn said, "but I'll need your trust." Later, after her father had gone to bed, Eliza found Quentyn still on the porch, staring up at the stars. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. He was silent for a long moment. 10 years ago, my sister was promised to a man to settle a debt. She was 18, he was cruel." His voice grew tight. "She took her own life rather than marry him." Eliza's hand flew to her mouth. "Mr. Porter, I'm so sorry. I was away, working cattle drives. I didn't know until it was too late." He turned to look at her, moonlight casting shadows across his face. "I couldn't save her, but maybe I can help you. At the cost of your dream, your land." He smiled slightly. "Dreams can change, Miss Peterson. Sometimes they get better." The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Quentyn met with the bank manager and several prominent business owners in town. He rode to neighboring ranches, returning dusty but determined. Eliza didn't know the details of his plan, only that he was calling in favors, making arrangements. 3 days before the wedding, Herbert Dawson and his men rode up to the Peterson homestead. Eliza's heart pounded as she stood beside her father and Quentyn on the porch to meet them. "What's this I hear about you trying to raise money, Peterson?" Dawson demanded, his gaze shifting suspiciously to Quentyn. "And who might you be?" "Quentin Porter, sir. Land agent and cattle investor." Dawson's eyes narrowed. "Porter, you've been asking a lot of questions around town about me, about my businesses." "Just doing my due diligence," Quentyn replied calmly. "Mr. Peterson has asked me to help resolve his financial situation." Dawson laughed, a harsh sound that made Eliza flinch. "Unless you've got $15,000 in your pocket, there's nothing to resolve. The agreement stands." "Actually," Quentyn said, pulling an envelope from his jacket, "I have a proposition for you." He handed Dawson a document. The older man's face darkened as he read it. "What is this nonsense? A promissory note for $15,000. $8,000 in cash, available immediately." The rest to be paid in monthly installments over the next year with interest. I don't want installments, Dawson spat. I want what was promised to me. A debt repayment was promised, Quentyn countered. That's what we're offering. Dawson crumpled the paper and threw it to the ground. The deal was $15,000 or the girl. Those were the terms Peterson agreed to. Terms agreed to under duress, Quentyn said, his voice hardening. I wonder what Judge Wilson would say about that, or about the interest rates you've been charging folks around here. A flash of uncertainty crossed Dawson's face. You threatening me, boy? Not at all. Just pointing out that this arrangement benefits everyone. You get your money plus interest. The Petersons keep their land and their dignity. And what do you get out of it? Dawson demanded. Quentyn's gaze briefly met Eliza's. That's my business. For a tense moment, it seemed Dawson might explode with rage. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. You've got sand, Porter, I'll give you that. He looked at Eliza with a cruel smile. She must be something special if you're willing to part with your life savings for her. The money is for the debt, Quentyn said evenly. Nothing more. We both know that's not true. Dawson turned his horse. Fine, I'll take the $8,000 now and the rest in payments. But if you miss a single one, I'll take the land, the girl, and have you run out of the territory. He jabbed a finger at George. Have the cash ready tomorrow. I'll send my lawyer with the papers. After they rode away, Eliza turned to Quentyn in disbelief. How did you do that? He never backs down. Men like Dawson care about one thing: profit. I made it more profitable for him to take the money than to force the marriage. Quentyn looked troubled. But we're not out of the woods yet. We still need to make those payments. That night, unable to sleep, Eliza found Quentyn by the corral watching the horses in the moonlight. She approached quietly, wrapping her shawl tighter against the autumn chill. You're giving up everything you've worked for, she said softly. Your dream of land, cattle. He turned to her, his expression gentle in the silvery light. Not everything. The partnership I proposed to your father is genuine. This land has potential. With his knowledge of farming and my experience with cattle, we could build something worthwhile. But why involve yourself in our troubles at all? You could have bought your land elsewhere, started fresh without our debt hanging over you. Quentyn was quiet for a long moment, his gaze returning to the distant mountains. When I rode into town and heard about a woman being traded to settle a debt, something in me couldn't let it stand. Then I met you and... He hesitated. I saw someone worth fighting for. The simple honesty of his words touched something deep within her. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, Eliza. Just help me make this place thrive so we can pay off Dawson and be free of him forever. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition, a possibility. Eliza felt her cheeks warm and she looked away first. We should get some rest, she said. Tomorrow will be a long day. The following morning, Dawson's lawyer arrived with the new agreement. Quentyn counted out $8,000, every cent of his savings, watching as it disappeared into the lawyer's satchel. The remaining $7,000 would be paid in monthly installments of $600 with interest. As they signed the papers, Eliza felt both relief and anxiety. They were still in debt, still at risk if they couldn't make the payments. But she was free from the marriage, and that was worth everything. How will we manage the payments? She asked Quentyn after the lawyer left. I've made arrangements with several ranchers to buy cattle on credit. We'll graze them here, fatten them up, and sell them at a profit. It won't be easy, but it's doable. Over the following weeks, the partnership began to take shape. Quentyn moved into the small bunkhouse on the Peterson property. Every morning, he and George would discuss the day's work over breakfast, with Eliza and Lily joining in the planning. They repaired fences, prepared fields for spring planting, and built additional corrals for the cattle that would arrive soon. Eliza found herself watching Quentyn when he wasn't looking, the way his hands moved confidently as he worked with tools, the gentle way he spoke to the horses, the smile that transformed his serious face when something amused him. He was unlike any man she'd ever known, thoughtful, determined, and unfailingly kind. One evening, as winter's first snow dusted the mountains, Eliza brought coffee to Quentyn in the barn where he was repairing tack. The first cattle arrive tomorrow, he said, accepting the cup gratefully. 20 head to start. If we can turn a profit on them, we'll increase the herd in spring. You've thought of everything, she observed, sitting on a hay bale across from him. Not everything. He set down his work. Eliza, there's something I need to ask you, something that's been on my mind. Her heart quickened. Yes, this arrangement, our partnership, I want to make sure you don't feel. He searched for the right word, obligated in any way. To me, personally, she frowned, not understanding. Obligated. I didn't help your family to win your favor. He looked uncomfortable now. I want that to be clear. You owe me nothing beyond our business agreement. Understanding dawned, and with it came both disappointment and appreciation for his integrity. I never thought otherwise, Quentyn. Good. He nodded, returning to his work. Good. But as she walked back to the house, Eliza found herself wishing he had asked something entirely different. The winter months brought challenges they hadn't anticipated. A harsh, cold snap froze the creek they relied on for water. 2 of the cattle sickened and died despite their best efforts. And the first payment to Dawson loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. We're short, George admitted one night in late January as they tallied their funds. Even if we sell the 3 steers that are ready, we'll still be $200 short for the payment. Quentyn rubbed his forehead tiredly. I can try to get an advance from the cattle buyer in Silverdale, or I could sell my mother's brooch, Eliza suggested quietly. It's gold with a small diamond. It might fetch enough. No, both men said simultaneously. That's your inheritance, her father added gently. Your mother wanted you to have it. Quentyn stood up, determination in his stance. I'll ride to Silverdale tomorrow. One way or another, we'll make the payment. That night, a blizzard swept in from the north, blanketing the world in white. By morning, drift stood shoulder high against the house, and the temperature had plummeted. Riding to town would be impossible until the storm passed. For 3 days, they were snowbound. Eliza found herself enjoying the forced closeness, the long evenings by the fire with Quentyn teaching Lily to play chess, her father telling stories of the early days in Montana territory. Despite their financial worries, there was a warmth in their home that had been missing since her mother's death years before. On the 3rd night, after her father and sister had gone to bed, Eliza sat with Quentyn by the dying fire. What will you do when the debt is paid? She asked. Will you still want to stay here, or will you look for your own land? He stared into the embers. I haven't thought that far ahead. Right now, all that matters is meeting our obligations. But surely you have dreams beyond that. He looked at her then, something unspoken in his eyes. Yes. I have dreams. The moment stretched between them, filled with words neither was ready to say. Finally, Quentyn stood. It's late, we should get some rest. As he moved toward the door, Eliza found her courage. Quentyn, he paused, looking back, I'm glad you came to Silverdale. Whatever happens with the debt, with the ranch, I'm glad you're here. His expression softened. So am I, Eliza, more than you know. The storm finally broke, and Quentyn made the difficult journey to Silverdale. He returned with news that the cattle buyer had agreed to advance them the money they needed, secured against their spring calves. The first payment to Dawson was made on time, much to the older man's evident disappointment. As winter gave way to spring, the partnership flourished. The remaining cattle survived and began to produce calves. George's vegetable garden promised a bountiful harvest, and something else was growing to something between Quentyn and Eliza that neither could deny any longer. It was on a warm April evening, with wildflowers carpeting the meadows, that Quentyn finally spoke what was in his heart. They had ridden out to check on a pregnant heifer and were returning as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. I never expected this, he said, as they let their horses walk side by side along the creek. When I came to Montana, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. And now, Eliza asked, her heart quickening, now I want something different, something more. He reined his horse to a stop and turned to face her. Eliza, I know we still have the debt to Dawson. I know the future is uncertain, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just friendship or partnership. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe as he continued. I came here to save you from a loveless marriage, and somewhere along the way I found myself falling in love with you, your strength, your kindness, your determination, everything about you. He looked down, suddenly unsure. I don't expect you to feel the same, but I needed you to know. Eliza guided her horse closer until their knees were almost touching. Quentin Porter, she said softly, for a smart man, you can be remarkably blind. He looked up, confusion and hope warring in his eyes. I've been in love with you since that night you sat on our porch and told me about your sister. Since you sacrificed everything to help a family of strangers. Since you showed me what a good man truly is. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. He dismounted and helped her down from her horse. When her feet touched the ground, his hands remained at her waist, drawing her closer. I have nothing to offer you yet, he said. Not until we're free of Dawson. You've already given me everything that matters, she replied. Freedom, hope. A future worth fighting for. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, as if neither could quite believe this moment was real. But the second was filled with all the passion and promise they'd held back for months. When they returned to the homestead, hand in hand, George and Lily were waiting on the porch. One look at their faces told the story. About time, George said gruffly, but his eyes were bright with approval. Over the following months, their love deepened as they worked side by side to build their future. The cattle operation grew steadily. George's furniture-making business began to attract customers from as far away as Helena. Each month they made their payment to Dawson, watching the debt slowly diminish. In October, exactly 1 year after Quentyn had first ridden onto the Peterson homestead, they made the final payment. Dawson himself came to collect it, his expression sour as Quentyn counted out the last dollars. Never thought you'd manage it, the older man admitted grudgingly. Most would have failed, lost everything. We're not most people, Quentyn replied, his arm protectively around Eliza's shoulders. Dawson's gaze lingered on them. No, I suppose you're not. He pocketed the money and turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Porter, you did right by her, more than I would have. It was as close to an apology as they were likely to get from Herbert Dawson. As they watched him ride away, Eliza felt the last weight lift from her shoulders. They were truly free. That evening, as the family celebrated around the dinner table, Quentyn excused himself briefly. When he returned, he was carrying a small wooden box that Eliza recognized as one her father had crafted. With your blessing secured, he said to George, who nodded with a smile, I have a question to ask. He knelt before Eliza, opening the box to reveal a simple but beautiful gold ring. Eliza Peterson, you were promised to another man to settle a debt. I came here and paid that debt with every cent I had. His voice grew tender. But the truth is, I'm the one who's indebted now to fate, to God, to whatever force brought me to you. Will you marry me and make this partnership permanent? Tears of joy spilled down Eliza's cheeks as she pulled him to his feet. Yes, she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. They were married that Christmas in the small church in Silverdale. The same townspeople who had once gossiped about Eliza's arranged marriage to Dawson now celebrated her union with Quentyn, a love story that had become something of a legend in the territory. As they exchanged vows, Eliza thought of how close she had come to a life of misery and how one man's sacrifice had changed everything. Quentyn had given his life savings to free her from a debt that wasn't his to pay. In return, he had gained something far more valuable than land or cattle. A family, a home, and a love that would endure long after the Montana wilderness had been tamed. As they rode back to their homestead as husband and wife, snow beginning to fall gently around them, Eliza looked at the man beside her, no longer a stranger who had ridden into her life, but the other half of her heart. No regrets, she asked, thinking of all he had given up for her. Quentyn's smile was as warm as summer despite the winter chill. Not a single one. Some debts are worth every penny. The future stretched before them, as vast and promising as the Montana sky, a future they would build together, one day at a time, on a foundation of sacrifice, courage, and a love that had been worth risking everything for.